Well, it's about 20 years ago that this house was built. And when it was built, this was a barn. Back here is where there were some horses. These were horse stalls, these red sections here. So a year or so after I moved in, I put in some actual doors and windows there to kind of close it off a little bit. Whenever I renovated the inside here and put in the office and the bathroom and the shop and all that, my next step of that evolution was to turn all of this back here into a porch or a patio of some sort. And that's what I'm working on right now, is getting the first steps to making that happen. So this is where the doors used to be. There was one there and one down there. You see that red. I took the barn doors out, and when I built up this wall for the window and the door shortly after buying the place, I didn't know what I was doing. I did it wrong. You can see that these walls are 6 inches thick. So this comes across and then it's recessed in here. There's a little gap. So eventually all this metal is going to get replaced. But what I need to do is build this out. So when I put the metal across and put new trim around the windows and around the door, it's all nice and flush and even across like it was supposed to be. Here's a better shot, because I took some of this trim off already. You could see there's about 1.5 inches gap, and I put this crappy aluminum siding trim on. That's all junk. That'll all come off as well. This metal siding back here is in terrible condition. This, like I said, this was a barn, so it was abused. There was tools and equipment packed up in here. It's all rusted down at the bottom, and there's a ceiling here, a roof, so that doesn't get water here. I think because they just hosed out the horses. All the water that ran out of the barn just came out through there and rusted all this metal out. So it's all going to get replaced. So this was all dirt, and what I did last year is I framed out to make it level with the foundation of the house. There's 4 inches of concrete in the house, so this will all be level with that. And I packed it in with some gravel. I'm going to get some cement poured here to make a foundation. So I'm cutting off the metal across the bottoms of this so that when they pour the cement, you can kind of see the foundation there. I've got all that spray foam. I need to chip all that away and smooth it out. But you could see the foundation where the cement will go. This way they could pour the fresh cement right up against the original house's foundation. And of course this was a barn, so there was no ceiling, no electricity or anything out here. Last year also I put in this ceiling, and I framed all that out and put that in, so that looks nice. And when I did that, I had to cut the metal across the top in order to get the J channel in for the ceiling. Concrete slab is down. The guy just left. Got these barricades around it to keep Ricky off of it for the next couple days. I think it did a pretty good job. It's a nice broom finish, and it's graded just ever so slightly away from the house, even though there's a roof overhead. If we get wind from the north, it can blow some water here. Got to measure the dimensions for the metal for the sides and frame all that out like I mentioned before, and get to finishing up this back porch. Normally with this kind of steel siding, the windows and doors are trimmed with this J-channel material. It's metal. This is a window I put in for the bathroom that I added. I don't like working with this at all. I think it's awful. It doesn't go together neatly, and it's a pain in the butt, quite honestly. So thankfully, the side of the house here is all warped and bowed and wacky. And when I put these windows and doors in initially, I put them in too far. So I can't even get J-channel around. You could see this is where the metal would come. A piece of J-channel wouldn't overlap if it was just right up against the side of the window. So to do something that I think will look nicer and is easier to work with, and is kind of necessary given the depth of the window, I'm building like a box around the windows and the doors. And essentially, this, once I get the metal on, because that's the trouble with the J-channel. You got to put the J-channel up first before you do the siding and sort of slide the metal under it. It just is, I hate it. So this way, I'll have a box built. The metal will come up. This is about how far it'll protrude. And then there'll be a piece of here, this extra trim, I'll add once the metal is on the side of the house. So I'll be able to bring this metal right up to the box, whereas if I don't cut it perfectly well, because cutting this stuff by hand, I always screw it up. I've been screwing it up for years on this house. So this way I'll have a little bit room for error. I've got a 2.5 inch wide thing, whereas the J-channel is only 1 inch. That gives me more wiggle room. And then this will come across here. And essentially that's how it'll look. That's how the window will be framed out. And the same thing will happen on the doors. You could just see how bowed this wall is. Like it's flush here. And that's how far out it is. Like it gets about 1/4 of an inch from top to bottom of the window. So that's another reason why this J-channel wouldn't work, and I got to use something flexible. This is all plastic. This is PVC, so it cuts just like wood. I'll be able to use adhesive and trim nails to hold it in place, and I'll be able to bend it. So it will, well, it'll be bent, I guess is all I could say. That's the plan. I'm going to do that. I'm going to frame out the windows. The door, I took the trim off of the door that was here because it was done wrong. I did it wrong myself. And I'll frame that out, and then I got that window down there in the end to do as well. Well, made some good progress this weekend. Got all the old metal removed from the outside. I sanded and straightened out and added wood and took wood off to make these walls as smooth as I can before I put this house wrap on it. I think they'll be okay. There's going to definitely be some issues, so we'll see how it turns out with the new metal once I get it. I placed the order. It'll be a few days. Got all the trim around the windows and the door. Turned out pretty good. And just a reminder, there'll be another piece that comes here that goes out on the outside. And when I put the new metal on, it'll butt up right against this here, this lip. So that'll hide the cut lines of the metal. When this was a barn, there used to be horses hanging out here, and they chewed up the corners and the edges of these posts that hold up the roof. I stained them when I first moved here to keep the carpenter bees from drilling into them. Today I'm going to go ahead and put pieces of custom cut metal that will cover these posts and match the other burgundy trim on the house. Kind of like you see the trim I put up here whenever I installed the ceiling. That's kind of how these things look once they're all together. Looks pretty nice. A lot cleaner. And never have to paint them or do any maintenance. So here's how these walls are looking so far. Pretty good from the bottom on up the sides. I think I did all right smoothing them out, sanding, getting everything pretty much flush here. But let me show you the problem. When I was putting this ceiling in, I knew this would be an issue. These bolts that they have that hold up the ceiling joists and all that, they protrude about 1/4 of an inch out. They weren't recessed. Like if you were building this with the expectation that this would be a finished porch someday, you'd recess those. And could I have pulled them out and carved the thing and recessed them and put them back? Yes, but I probably would have screwed that up worse than what we got. So the result of that is you could see that anything that goes up flush against this bolt is going to be 1/4 of an inch rippled. And that has an effect on the way things line up across the top. So you see the J channel at the bottom. That turned out pretty nice and tidy. Normally these kind of things would have J channel across the top as well. I couldn't put J channel in because of those bolts. It's more of a rigid type of trim that just doesn't flex like the actual steel panels flex. So because of that, any place where there's one of those bolts, you're going to see that, a gap right there. And it's just because it's pushing the metal out. I measured it, it's measured right, it's cut pretty much right. It's cut about as right as it can be without the J channel, and every so often you get one of those little gaps. They do not make, and I've looked, they do not make a type of like crown molding sort of trim for steel construction that would be able to go on the outside of these panels that would meet the contours of each of those ribs. Those ribs are standard. Like there's no reason why somebody couldn't make something like that. The distance between them is all standard, and I don't know, but there's literally nothing like that to kind of hide those gaps across the top. I'm just gonna have to live with it. I'm not gonna point it out. I'll always know it's there. It'll bother me, but that's just about as good as it's gonna get across the top. And it's all due to those bolts. If those bolts weren't there, I'd have J channel across the top, and that would give me an inch of wiggle room on the top. So even if things weren't cut right, which I'm doing a pretty good job cutting this stuff, but even if I wasn't cutting it right, I'd be able to hide up to an inch of screw up with J-channel up there. And there's just no way to get it. So there you go. That's going to be the main problem with this whole thing. But you can see I've only got a little bit left to go. It's turning out good otherwise. It's a lovely rainy day here in Tennessee, so I figured this would be about a good enough time as any to go ahead and end this video. I built up a bunch of dirt along the edge of the slab and graded it down to keep water from accumulating underneath the slab, and planted some grass seed that will eventually grow a few weeks from now. You can see I've got a whole bunch of pavers and stuff like that, and some extra blocks like I have for this tiny little retaining wall that I built years and years ago. I'm going to extend that retaining wall since I've got some of the materials left over. It's going to come right across here and then make a right angle to the edge of to the corner of the porch here as well. So where all that water is puddled up and that floor mat is located, that'll all be the same sort of rocks and stuff that I've got along the whole side of the house. Just want to show you how everything turned out otherwise. I think it looks pretty good. So you can see I've got all new metal across the whole wall. I wrapped those posts and also wrapped the, I don't even know what you call this part of a joist, I guess you would call that. That's wrapped as well. And of course I did the ceiling too, put the ceiling in. That was done last year, but you're seeing it for the first time now. And then all the metal, I think it looks pretty good. Those little imperfections I mentioned, they're not really noticeable unless you're really looking for them, or if I point them out to you. So not too bad. And then I did finish up the trim around the windows and the doors. I think all that turned out pretty good too. It's all PVC, so it'll never need to be painted. And looks pretty good. Doesn't look as bad as I kind of imagined that it would. So that's one window. Got it around the door as well. I think it looks all right. And then the second window. Not so bad, not so bad. And then this this outlet, I didn't do this right when I built the interior to the barn here, when I turned that into an office and bedroom and all that. So that thing sticks out. It's ugly. It's just how it is. I should have predicted ahead of time that I was going to be putting outlets out here, and I didn't. But anyways, I built a cover for it. Doesn't look too bad, I guess. Serves a purpose. That extension cord goes to my camper. Someday I'll have electricity out there in the carport, but not for a little while. But otherwise, it's all set. Got the furniture from the Amish family down the street. Got a good deal on that. Swing is really comfortable. Eventually this will be screened in. There'll be a 3-foot wall, about as high as that propane tank, a 3-foot wall that goes all the way along. And then screen above it. Screen door down on that end. And then sometime later this spring, from that post all the way out close to those trees, and then across to the right will be all chain link fence that'll connect to where that old fence is there that I'll be tearing down. So that'll give Ricky full reins to run all the way around. There'll be a doggy door right about there so he can come into the porch and so forth. But that's another project for another day. And one last side-by-side comparison, so you could see the old versus the new and how much the back of the house has changed in the 6 years since I've owned it. Alright, well, with all this rain coming, I'm going to go ahead and end the video like I said. I do thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.